Welcome to Westworld FM, a podcast about HBO's Westworld. My name is Alex.
And my name is Nick.
Today we will be discussing episode 4 of the show, titled Dissonance Theory. We will not be discussing the next time on preview at the end of the show, but we will be spoiling everything through episode 4 of the series. So please pause and go catch up if you're not current on the show. You can find more episodes of our podcast at westworld.fm. We're also on several of the biggest podcast catchers, so please search for us there. And if we're not there, let us know and we'll get on there. And we're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can send feedback to westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on air. You can send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. Speaking of Twitter, we've got some tweets and stuff to read. I did have a brief little discussion with our friend from last week. I think I called her Anne Katrine, but I wanted to clarify. I will refer to her as Katrine from now on. But she said, Anthony Hopkins is a young man with super neat CGI trick, immediate Elephant Man throwback, partially also because of the way he was dressing. I fangirled is what she said. So
those Elephant Man fangirls.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's an awesome reference. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
You ever seen that movie?
I have not.
Oh, it's great.
I think that's one of the movies that they used as a reference for that CGI.
Makes sense.
So, yeah, very cool. And then we also got a few more messages. Chris Jackson, WPS on Twitter, wrote in to say, I don't know if anyone mentioned this, but the hat color reference is a hacker term. White hat on the path of good and black hat is nefarious. They both perform the same actions, but for the sake of a different cause. In the show, they both kill just for good or bad reasons. And then one of his buddies also chimed in. Actually, 3 terms are used. This is barely Doug, B-E-A-R-L-Y Doug. Black hat is the bad guys. Gray hat is good or bad, depending on the cause. And then white hat is good guys. He says that he started off as a black hat, realized the harm, transitioned to gray hat, and now he is white hat. #educate. And then he said, I was a black hat for a year, gray hat for 6 months, full white hat from 1998 on, used knowledge to educate others. Sorry for the deluge of tweets. Haven't put my hat on for years, but still use my skills occasionally. Yeah, so I was aware of this. I just didn't even really think of it in terms of that. There's some minutia between black hat and white hat in terms of like black hat hackers will find exploits and exploit them for their own gain and not share it with the company or publicly. White hat hackers tend to be people who are working on behalf of a company in order to find exploits. And then gray hat they're kind of the ones that are like, hey, we found this exploit, you have this long to fix it or give us money to fix it ourselves or we're going to make it public is kind of how it goes. So it's a weird hierarchy, and I don't know that it directly relates to the show, but it is definitely the vocabulary that they're using. It definitely evokes that.
Yeah, I would say it seems pretty intentional, given, especially after this week's episode, we have numerous mentions of black hat.
Yeah,
saying "Come black hat with me."
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. They're using it in that vernacular for sure. So, thank you guys for writing into our Twitter, Westworld FM.
Thanks, guys.
And we do also have an email. Gordon emailed us at westworldfm@gmail.com. Our old pal Gordon, he said, first of all, although I mentioned it during our Skype talk, that was on the Midwest Film Nerds episode 200, which you guys can go check out if you would like. I wanted to reaffirm that I really, really love and enjoy your podcast. Such good conversations are the reason why I love podcasts in the first place. I also like the dynamic of Alex being more into online theories and bringing them to the table while Nick reacts to them. I don't know if you're intentionally going for this, but not reading stuff on Reddit myself, this is a cool place to get a glimpse of what other people come up with. Thank you, Gordon. Wasn't really intentional, but I can kind of start doing that.
But it will be going forward, yeah. I imagine. Alex can't help himself.
Yeah, kind of. The Reddit thread for the post discussion, there's a lot of really funny people in there, too. There were some really good jokes. Maybe I can pull that up and read a few of them. But Gordon went on to say, pivoting from this, I wanted to say that Alex's mention of the man in black is future William. I'm okay with putting this out there in the non-spoiler area now.
Sure.
The man in black is future William theory really blew my mind, and considering this is a Nolan vehicle, I was sure they were going for this, and as you pointed out, by the end of episode 3, it seemed to debunk this. However, there's a Slash Film post on how maybe this theory was in fact not being debunked by episode 3 at all. Considering that you regularly mention Slash Film, I'm sure you read it so far, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Yeah, after this week, I have I'm like 99.95% sure that the Man in Black is not future William.
Or present William.
Or present William.
Or future.
Yeah, I don't. What? Yeah. But.
Yeah, I would agree. But it's funny because now, even though the show is presenting stuff that seems to reinforce the idea that they are two separate people, I still keep watching it, kind of wishing that, hoping something's going to happen.
There's one thing in this episode that still leaves the possibility kind of on the table for me, but we'll talk through that as we go through this next episode, Dissonance Theory. And then Gordon also went on to say, another thing that I found super interesting was your interpretation on why the stray host killed himself. I could not imagine from all the things in the first 3 episodes this would be a subject to the most diverse interpretations, considering that you had 2 different theories and I had a totally different view on the situation. I read it as if the host was conflicted between the voices in his head telling him to kill the female guard and his programming prohibiting him from doing so. So the only choice he could find to ease his suffering was to kill himself. I'm wondering whether we find out something more about this in the future episodes. Lastly, and slightly off topic, I love that Nick brought up Run Lola Run, as it's one of my favorite German movies. You guys are awesome. Keep up the great work. Cheers from Germany, Gordon. Thank you, Gordon, for writing in.
Thanks, Gordon.
As always, fantastic emails from Gordon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the stray host, I think in this episode, things are kind of commented on that Elsie at least thinks that Gordon is on the right track. She states that it's a reflex. They called it part of his Samaritan reflex, which I don't know that did we talk about that on the show at all?
I don't think so, because that term seemed new to me.
So the hosts are programmed with a Samaritan reflex so that they will effectively spring into a gun battle in order to deflect the gunfire from other hosts. Or from other guests.
Okay.
They will try to be bullet sponges.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think that was mentioned in the previous week's episode.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where I heard it or read about it. It might have been on the subreddit or something. But so it kind of makes sense to me that he, like this affected host, wanted to kill Elsie, but also his programming wouldn't. He couldn't overcome his programming like Dolores did in that episode. So therefore, he ended up killing himself.
To prevent himself from killing her.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's that Gordon, I think, hit it on the head. I think he was right about it. I kind of like my theory of him being told to not let the information get into the command's hands. There's really no evidence
any which way yet.
Yeah.
As to what happened. Everybody's sort of acting like it's no big deal, which is really interesting. I'm kind of waiting for the point in the show when the characters begin to start taking things fairly seriously.
Yeah, where they're going to be like, there's a lot of weird shit going on right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because it begs the question of how often do weird things like this happen behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And everybody has their own theory on what it is, and to them it's the most reassuring theory. Like she's a programmer, so she thinks it's a weird bug and we'll just work it out. Whereas Ashley seems to maybe think he seems to think it's a program error too.
Yeah. We did have one more tweet that I forgot. Quinn22K Quinn wrote in and said, okay, I asked what everybody thought of the episode. Quinn wrote back and said, okay, some things cleared up, a little slow, but good. The Man in Black and Maeve are more developed now. And Quinn also said, I went through about 10 different Westworld podcasts and you guys are the best. Thank you, Quinn.
Thank you.
That's
I
awesome.
think so also. I listened
we agree with you.
I listened to a few other ones and I thought I couldn't get into it right at the beginning, and I don't know that we're necessarily you'll love us within the first 2 minutes either, but there was one that I straight up turned off almost immediately because I was like, these people are just obnoxious.
Yeah.
They're just trying to be silly and jokey, and
yeah, I'm a little conflicted.
I'd rather just talk, man.
I'm a little conflicted on what to do with theme music because I've been using the Westworld theme, and I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So I might just give this one a cold open. If anybody has any ideas for music or anything like that, or you want to make us a song,
hey.
I don't know if we're at that level yet, but if you want to make a Westworld FM theme song, we will probably use it
for at least one episode.
Yeah,
maybe we can have revolving themes.
That'd be good.
Who knows?
That'd be cool. All right, we can get on with the episode. This episode was directed by Vincenzo Natali. Famous for a movie called Splice that came out a couple of years ago. He's a horror director.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right
but I recognize his name from like a few different things, so I thought it would be cool to kind of state that. And I think this was also the episode that was co-written by Ed Brubaker.
It was.
Of comics.
I was very excited.
Comics fame.
Yes.
So that was cool.
One of my favorite comic writers. I was following him on Twitter, repeatedly tweeting about how his episode was airing and not to tweet him during it because he'd be watching it. Or don't expect a reply, basically, during the episode.
Yeah.
And a lot of other comic. That's pretty much all I follow on Twitter now is like a few filmmakers and a lot of comic writers and artists because they're very active on Twitter. They're very active with their fans
they
too.
Engage.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they like people's tweets and they respond. It's really cool. And especially watching all these, I think filmmakers and actors sometimes are just too busy to bother with Twitter, or they have like personal assistants,
or like their Twitter probably is just unusable because of all the people tweeting at them.
Yeah, that's true. But the comic writers, they seem to talk to each other a lot, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
anyway,
so
I love Ed Brubaker. I'm glad he's involved.
Yeah, he's an executive producer too. I don't know if you've spotted his name in the credits or not, but
yeah, I saw his name way back when on IMDb, and I was like, no, cool.
Yeah. So we get another Bernard and Dolores chat at the top of the episode. Dolores is kind of reacting to her parents being killed, and she has a very eloquent speech. After which Bernard kind of offers to remove her grief, and she says, "Why would I want that? Pain, their loss, it's all I have left of them," which echoes something that Bernard said in the previous episode.
Yes.
I don't know if we're supposed to take that as she, like maybe he said that to her before, or maybe Bernard has that dialogue programmed in him if he's a secret robot, like some people seem to think. I think it could be taken a few different ways, but yeah, so I don't know if you had any thoughts about when this scene happened.
Yes, I did. I've said this in every episode I think we've recorded so far, that I don't know when these chats are taking place, but I don't think they're taking place in the right order. Or not that there's a right order, but there's something strange about when this is going on.
This is really weird because we know at the end of last episode that Dolores fainted in William's arms.
Regardless of when that happened, that definitely happened. She came from somewhere to the campfire with the gun and passed out. Yep.
And then the next scene, we're going to see Dolores wake up in the plains with William and Logan.
Still there, yep.
From that previous scene, the last scene in last episode. So when this conversation with Bernard happened is kind of completely up in the air. Like, I don't think they would pull her out. He would pull her out and then reinsert her while she's with a guest.
This was actually the... Yeah, exactly, because how could she?
Exactly.
Yeah. This is when the only time in the series so far where I've begun to question the reality of everyone involved in the park.
Yeah.
I began to wonder if the whole park was just a manifestation of Dolores' mind or something strange like that. I 100% don't believe that's what's happening. But for a moment, it made me go...
Chewing on that.
Yeah, exactly. It made me wonder what everything I'm being presented with, I'm taking as fact and reality, whereas... it's probably a better idea to not necessarily do that. Who's
unreliable? We don't know who's unreliable yet. And
right. Yeah, exactly.
There almost certainly is somebody who's unreliable in this whole thing. So that scene goes on to have Dolores say, I think there might be something wrong with this world, something hiding underneath. And Bernard directs her. He says, I want you to try the maze. Mm-hmm. Find the center of it. And then he says, if you can do that, maybe you can be free.
This is the first time I've been very intrigued to know what exactly is going on with the maze. Yeah. It's been on the side. It's been in the peripherals for me. We're kind of like, that'd be cool to get to eventually. But now it's been shoved up to like higher priority now. Yeah. Now I'm very curious as to what's going on.
Yeah, so I don't know. And I will note, this is the first mention in this episode of 2, I think, where somebody talks about the maze being connected to freedom. Mm-hmm. So we'll get to that in a little bit. As I said, Dolores awakens in the plains with William and Logan. She's got her gun as well. It's just a short little scene there. But then we switch over to Maeve and Clementine talking while Maeve flashes back. The piano song is a Cure song this week. It's called A Forest.
Okay.
I didn't recognize it. I had to find that on the subreddit.
Did we ever figure out what last week's was?
I don't know. I will have to do some research and see if somebody.
I love this weekly.
It's
name that tune.
Yeah, and I still haven't taken that time to be like, what is this? Why are these? So yeah, I'm wondering if a guest or somebody in the future will react to it, and
like that tweet I sent you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really funny.
Yeah, the host is trying to seduce a guest, and the guest is like, "Is this Black Hole Sun?"
Yeah,
playing
it
him?
said like "sexy robot, come this way," and me, whoa, hold on, is that piano playing Black Hole Sun? Something like that. It was worded very, very well.
Yes,
it was hilarious.
Better than we could
Sorry,
reproduce
I can't give credit to who wrote it.
Yeah, you could probably find it.
Yeah.
The brothel gets so Maeve is having these flashbacks to the brothel being shot up by a guest. She remembers seeing the body shop workers discussing about her needing to get back on the floor in a rush, despite a bullet fragment still being stuck in her. So they presumably sewed her back up and put her back out. And then Maeve races home to draw a picture of the body shop worker. And then she goes to store that picture in the floorboards to find that she's already drawn this picture 6 or 7 times, or more than that, many times. What did you think of that scene?
It was awesome.
That's really cool.
Very unsettling. Yeah, that image of just somebody in like sort of a decontamination suit is it's pretty horrifying.
Yeah, and not only the image, but also just the idea that I have gone through this before and I didn't know it.
Right.
It's very much a Leonard Shelby kind of moment as we continue the Memento references. But yeah, that was just super unsettling.
Yeah, the whole Maeve's whole subplot is just its own horror movie.
Yeah.
It's really crazy.
I've also learned that it's not Thandie Newton. It's Tandy Newton.
That makes a lot of sense.
Like the Thames River. So I apologize to Tandy Newton.
I do.
I know she's listening.
Yes. Sorry, Tandy.
Anything else with Maeve at this point as of yet?
Nope. That might have been my favorite scene in the episode.
Yeah.
But that was definitely kind of a gut churning moment.
Yeah.
Again, just humanizing the hosts is really
absolutely
really awesome.
Yeah, we're kind of getting to this point where it feels like Maeve and Dolores are gaining their consciousness in very different ways.
Yeah.
Dolores is getting kind of a very pure ascension to it, and Maeve is just kind of like being terrorized into having it.
Yeah, Dolores feels like a very kind, kind of youthful,
nurtured.
Yes, like kind of blooming into who you will become, and Maeve's is like this kind of horrifying
shock into
downward spiral into
insanity.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Then we cut to Teresa Cullen discussing the tray with Elsie Hughes. Elsie suggests that it might be the Samaritan reflex, as we discussed earlier. But Cullen says, you guys are off this. This is now QA's investigation. We're going to investigate these things from now on because you guys aren't figuring anything out. Elsie gets pretty pissed at Bernard that he just kind of rolls over for Cullen. But he just kind of explains to her that they think something's going on and they think we're hiding something. Elsie says, we are. And she says, she has the line, she says, it's like everyone around here's got some sort of effing agenda except for me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty, I think she's right about that.
She's just showing up to work still.
Yep. And then Bernard dismisses her concerns and points out that there's, so she showed him the turtle with the supposed Orion constellation on it, but Orion's belt only has 3 stars, whereas this carving had 4 in his belt. So not really left with much there. Any thoughts on that exchange?
I mean, the idea that he was really into constellations never really added up to much. I think it's probably in some way related to the maze.
Well, and the interesting thing is that Elsie is talking to Bernard about this, and Bernard very squarely is like, you are connecting these dots, is essentially what he says to her. So I'm wondering if that whole stars thing is just kind of, she saw that what she thought was a constellation being carved and then assumed that he was heading out to a mountain to actually look into the stars, because we don't.
Isn't Ashley the one who says it's a constellation?
Ashley suggests that it's a constellation to her, yeah. So that's true. But
I do love that line from Bernard. Doesn't he basically say you're projecting onto them? Yeah. And you can't do that.
You're projecting this important, like these stories onto them.
They only do what we tell them to do.
Yeah.
So he thinks if you just look at who they are, at their code or their dialogue, whatever, you'll know what you need to know.
Which to me felt like empty words from Bernard. Bernard being the one nurturing consciousness out of... Like, it felt like he was spewing Ford's rhetoric at her, but he doesn't necessarily believe it.
It felt like Bernard being political.
Yeah.
not for the first time necessarily, but managing essentially. It was he's in charge of her, so he's kind of keeping her on the task and saying, "Listen, just get back to your job because you need to figure this out.
There's other stuff to do
because I don't have time to do it."
Yeah.
No, it was cool. I liked that show of Bernard being a little bit. I'm failing to think
diplomatic.
Yeah, just being a little bit more of like a managerial, a little more businesslike,
okay.
Because we've basically been presented to him as sort of the genius kind of dreamer who's just left to tinker and be creative and that sort of thing. But it's fun watching him, realize he has his role not just because he's brilliant, but because he can also manage his people and get things done.
Yeah,
or so we think. Anyway.
So then we cut to Logan and William arguing about Dolores coming along for the bounty hunt that they're going to do. Logan wants to see through the bounty hunt, whereas William wants to take her back to Sweetwater. Logan's like, "You brought me on this crap, now we're going to do it." And Logan has a line about the park sent her so that you'll finally have something to give a shit about. And he goes on to say, this is why the company needs to bump our stake in this place. And they have this discussion about, so this is business. It's not just, for fun. Mm-hmm. Logan says everything. In our family, everything is business. So Logan's family has some sort of stake in Westworld, which I think is a pretty interesting thing to note.
Yeah, I think as opportune a moment, there was a bit at the very, very end of this episode talking about how there was somebody there.
Yeah, so Teresa Cullen is meeting with Ford later on in the episode. Yes. And she's basically just like, well, they're going to have to send somebody to the board is going to have to send somebody in order to understand if the board is happy with what's going on right now. And then Ford mentions to her, well, I thought he was already here. I thought they were already here. They were already sent. Some theories online say it could be the Man in Black, but I don't think so. Other people were pointing to Logan could potentially be that one.
I don't think it's Logan. I think if anything, it's William.
You think it could be William?
Yeah, because if he's... Well, I guess the line you just said that Logan says kind of reinforces...
Yeah, William's kind of unaware of that there was a strict business connection to it. But...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Once they said that line, for some reason my first thought was William, because he hasn't been terribly engaged with it the whole time.
Yeah.
He's almost more taking it in and just kind of watching how other people choose to deal with it. So...
Yeah, he could always be... feigning Logan into thinking
I think Ford said it with more authority than that. He said they're here, they're already here.
Okay,
like it wasn't really questioning it, and he got some enjoyment out of the fact that they were already there, and he knew, and Cullen didn't.
Yeah,
and maybe just because the board sent someone doesn't necessarily mean that they're aware that they were sent there to test it out. If that makes any sense. For some reason I feel like it's William, and William may have been brought along by, like, Logan may know that William is
the test subject.
He's the test, but William is not aware. Seeing how he takes it, how he chooses to interact with the world, and how much he buys into it.
I guess to me it just feels like Logan, that conversation that Logan and William have in a strict statistical design of experiments kind of discussion, to kind of reveal to William, it's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that we're talking about here. If William suspects that he is doing business, then it will change how he is it could potentially change how he is doing this business in the park.
Yeah.
So
Logan's also angry, I think, or irritated in that moment.
Yeah,
so he
that's
may
true.
have slipped. Clearly, he's not the most.
Logan's always irritated.
He's not the most responsible person. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. I wanted to get to mention that up front before I forgot to come around to it later, because that was awesome. Probably my favorite part of the episode actually was the reveal that there was somebody
in there from the
testing
board.
it.
Yeah, that it'll be interesting to find out.
It could be the Man in Black. We find out a nugget about him in this episode later that suggests
something.
Yeah,
but
anyway,
we'll get there. So they just argue about that, and then I think they decide to just hold on to Dolores and continue along their path.
Right.
The Man in Black finds the snake along the riverbank. It turns out that it's her name's Armistice, which I don't think we've heard in the show.
I don't think so either.
At least that's what she's credited as. But she has a snake tattoo, which I found interesting. I remember seeing her face in the first episode, because as we realize and / find out, she's one of Hector. She's Hector's right-hand woman, essentially. And that snake tattoo on her face to me originally looked like damage.
It looked like a burn.
I thought it was a burn mark or something, but after seeing the thing all together, it very, very much looks just like a tattoo. It doesn't necessarily seem like there's any burns or anything associated with it.
Armistice is her name?
I think so.
That's interesting.
If I'm wrong, please write in Westworld FM on Twitter or westworldfm@gmail.com. So Armistice's men get the jump on the Man in Black and Lawrence, and the Man in Black kills 2 of the men to then join her on her mission, noting that there are some vacancies in her team. And they know that she wants something out of a jail. We can get more to that later. And then right here, we cut to a scene of the QA control room, noting that Dolores is deviating from her loop. She is far away from Abernathy Farm with Logan and William in the Mexican-like town that Lawrence was at. We were at with Lawrence a couple weeks ago. This, to me, is the deconfirming of William being the Man in Black. Because that means William's in present day. Because Stubbs has got to be in present day, you know? Like, I think that's just got to be where it all falls apart. The only thing that's still keeping me in there's some kind of mind fuckery around, pardon my French, is the first scene, the Dolores interview with Bernard, because it just doesn't make any sense where it is. It
could be possible that if we're gonna ride this theory out just for fun, try to find ways that it could work.
Yeah.
I was during this scene, I was actually thinking of that. Unless she completed all this action with William when he was young, the Man in Black, and now she is retracing those steps because there's some kind of end game going on.
God damn it, Nick. Yeah, that's. I guess that's possible.
Like something that her father said to her.
The thing about that is that there's a man there who we don't know if he's a host or if he's one of the workers or maybe both or whatever. He shows up as like a deputy, being like, "There's reports about a woman missing from her father's farm,"
right?
And she says, "Oh, my father's dead," because she remembers him being killed. But then William walking up forces that man away.
Yeah. Well, he seems like that guy was placed in there
in order to kind of correct her back to where she should be.
But
however, I guess it doesn't matter, because maybe if she did this in the past again, they would still be having that issue, right?
The way that host handles it is very threatening.
Yeah.
It's very...
He grabs her arm very firmly.
I mean, unless at the end of this season or towards the end with William and Dolores, unless Arnold shows up and he somehow is the nugget that's back in the back of her mind that in present day with the Man in Black triggers to send her back along the same steps 30 years later with the Man in Black again. I don't really know. Something weird like that could happen. Yeah. I just want to mention, because I forgot to, that the Mexican Town set is the set that they used repeatedly in Arrested Development for Mexican City, and it's so awesome.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
The first time they were there, I was like, this looks like such a set. And I didn't care. I was like, whatever. But I was like, it just has that feeling to it. And then as soon as somebody posted the exact same camera setup from Arrested Development, I lost it. I was laughing so hard. I was like, oh, that's so awesome.
That's the real spoiler. That's what's going to ruin the rest of your views of this show.
That was like 2 weeks ago. And then this week, as soon as they cut to the establishing shot, I just started laughing again, because I just pictured the stair car parked there, and
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's great.
So as for what else is going on here, Ashley has her flagged for behavior as they see her way outside of the normal range of operation. Ford, they note in the control room that they don't know if she should be there or not, because Ford's groundwork for his new storyline has got everything in disarray. And then some kind of man, as I said, shows up and he's got a badge on, so he might be a deputy or a sheriff or something. Tries to get Dolores back to her loop, but she says that her parents are dead, and the man tries to accost her, but William saves her. And then William offers to leave her at the Mexican Town and pick her up, but she decides that she wants to go and stay with him. Any other thoughts on that?
Nah.
Nope. Then we cut back to the Man in Black and Lawrence with Armistice to see if her intel is good on the thing that she's after. She ends up killing 2 people in this field with her men back up on the ridge. The Man in Black is amused with Armistice. And then we cut back to Dolores opening up to William about her changing perspective on things and her growing of this consciousness where he's kind of like... It's interesting because I feel like you can see in this scene that William is interacting with her and being like, wow, this is on a whole nother level. Like it feels like he's engaging with her and being like, well, you're a robot and these things and this is how I think you function. But she surprises him with her depth, I think is the interesting thing because she has this consciousness that she's dealing with.
Right. This is almost the Turing test kind of moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's fine. It's William finally being seduced by Westworld. Like Logan primed him.
Yeah.
By saying, it gets everyone eventually.
William asks where she's going to go because she says she doesn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes and stares up at the moon and she starts having flashbacks of the body shop team cleaning up at the Abernathy farm after one of the random bloodbaths that could have happened there. And then William pulls her out of it and she doesn't mention anything to him about it. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting scene.
Yep.
We cut back to the Man in Black at the encampment with Armistice and her men. This is where the guest walks up to the Man in Black and says that he's an admirer and your foundation literally saved my sisters. And then the Man in Black interrupts him and says, one more word and I'll cut your throat. This is my fucking vacation. So the Man in Black has a foundation, is what we've learned. A lot of people are assuming online that the man is about to say, you've saved my sister's life.
Yeah.
But I think their choice to cut that, it doesn't sound to me like he's about to say life. And the words on the closed captions they stop at sisters and then ... So I don't know what's going on there, but I think there's something going on there in terms of what the foundation actually does. Any thoughts on the Man in Black's foundation?
It's interesting. I'm glad we needed this in this episode.
Yeah.
I think if we had too much more of the show without a little bit more backstory on the Man in Black, he would have become a little tedious.
Yeah.
It's already starting to border on it for me. I was kind of like, he's going to do something cool, I guess. And then I don't have anything invested in what he does or doesn't do.
He's still on a bunch of fetch quests to get to the really
basically
interesting stuff. But
no, I think that's cool. I'm curious to know more about who he is, and I think this was another clue that indicated maybe he is on the board in some way. He seems to be somebody of importance. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, and I think this ties in with the Ashley stay. We disagreed on it. But
no. Yep. I'm glad you said that. I was going to mention that later.
But where Stubbs in a few episodes ago stated that man gets whatever he wants.
Yep.
He's important.
Yes.
So.
Especially if he's been coming there for 30 years.
Absolutely, yeah. He's got like the rewards card.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we kind of mentioned that. That's like a casino. There's like a rewards tier. Yeah,
yep.
He's a platinum diamond quartz member.
So Lawrence explains that the Armistice and her men are looking for something in a jail and that they want to steal a Union cannon to then assault the jail. The Man in Black says, I don't have time for this, and says he will leave at dawn to go and retrieve this thing. And he basically says that he wants a few words with her in exchange. And he explains something about a man named Arnold. So he mentions Arnold, second Arnold mention that we've gotten so far. And he tells her that Arnold is the creator or original settler of Westworld. And he created this world where you can't die. And then he says, but Arnold went and broke his own world, and but he thinks that Arnold left one story to tell, a story with real stakes and real violence. I wasn't expecting to get any Arnold information out of the Man in Black.
No, it's interesting.
So I think there's got to be some interesting connections between Ford and the Man in Black, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts before we move on to the heist?
No.
So Lawrence and the Man in Black get intentionally arrested. The man in black offers cigars to the deputy, but there's no smoking, and the deputy takes 2 of the 3 cigars. Lawrence has been a prisoner before, but the man in black is there to set him free. This is what I was talking about with the man in black starts talking to Lawrence about how I'm here to set you free, in the sense of like, we're going to find this maze. I'm very curious about that. We still don't, we have so little context with the maze that the fact that Dolores is headed there for freedom and that the man in black knows that it's got something to do with freedom, I think is interesting. I should say there's another entertaining internet theory that the man in black in this show is the man in black from the movie, and that the movie is a prequel to the series.
Oh, that's funny.
There are people saying that this is the same man in black and that he found his way through the maze and then he becomes a host, gained consciousness, not becomes a host, but he ends being a host and becomes a quote unquote real person.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I think it's a funny theory, but I don't think it has any real credence.
Nah.
Not yet anyway. So the jail sheriff recognizes Lawrence as soon as they pull up to the jail as the most wanted man in 3 territories. The man in black suggests the firing squad for him. The man in black gets locked up with our friend from the first episode, Hector Escaton, played by Rodrigo Santoro. Noted handsome man, Rodrigo Santoro.
Yes.
And then the man in black mentions to him, "You always seemed like a market-tested thing."
I loved this bit of dialogue. It was very funny.
It's a good little exchange of like, the man in black likes to talk to the hosts as though he doesn't. It's funny because I was thinking the mention of the Foundation is a real character breaking moment for the man in black, but he's been breaking character the entire time. He's calling everybody what they are.
Sure, he has no quote unquote regard for the story, for their humility or humanity rather. He just treats them like he just casually. I think he likes acting like a god. He's as close to Ford and Arnold level as we can get because he knows everything. He even tells Rodrigo Santoro's character, he says, it's going to take him 3 more days. He's already seen what happens. He knows how long it takes for his crew to break him out.
Yeah, and he tells him that the safe that he wants to get in, what he wants is not in the safe.
Right.
The safe that he keeps trying to steal from.
Which is like nuts. How long has, we continue the parallel here with a video game.
Yeah.
Like how long has the Man in Black been playing this game that he knows every quest line? He knows how many playthroughs has he done. He knows all these characters. He knows.
It tells you a little bit about their turnover too. Like, I guess that's the thing is like, maybe in the past they've only been adding new narratives along, but now Ford is just wrecking everything.
Yeah, which is true. That comes back to that later. Yeah, it's almost like DLC, like we've already mentioned. Like they keep adding more content and more content, but if you want to go back and play the old stuff, it's still there. Yeah.
So he's just so seasoned in all of it. He's seen everything that's
right, which is great. And he's there's only one game left to play, one facet. Yeah, I loved the line where he analyzes. He's market tested. He talks about his tasteful scar. It's like it's not a gross. It's true. It's not a gross scar. Like if you saw somebody walking down the street with that, you'd go, "Whoa!" Like I want to know what that story is. But you're not like trying to take pictures because it's grotesque. You're just like looking at it like, "Wow." It accentuates.
It's intriguing.
Yes, exactly. It makes him even more tall, dark, and mysterious.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really funny.
And then we cut to the Man in Black using the one match that he requested from Armistice to light his cigar. And then we cut to the control room where QA receives a request for 2 pyrotechnics, which I thought was an interesting look at how that works in the...
Yes.
So like they can basically allow or disallow things to explode if they would like them to. And they use the cigar to blow open the jail as Stubbs approves the
Which is
request.
interesting. I wonder how that request function works. How the Men in Black knew that he was going to be able to do that and how they received that and know this is what's... You know what I mean? Like, how does that transaction happen?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to say. Like, I think there's room for it there to be kind of... the way that they talk about later on jamming the guns, they obviously have these controls in place to then enhance the story, and like maybe he needed maybe there's an instance down the road where somebody has these exploding cigars and wants to use them to blow something up as the easy way out, and then it turns out it's a dud because they don't approve the request. And I think we're seeing a very interesting way for them to shape the narrative that these people are experiencing on a very granular basis.
Interesting.
And so that approval or denial of the pyrotechnics, the ability to jam guns and jail people to even make them cool down or slow them down. As I think the first dude asks Ashley Stubbs about the Man in Black, should we slow him down?
Right.
I think it's very interesting to see how quality assurance is doing their job when things are working correctly.
Yeah. That's true.
So... But yeah, I think you're right. I'm interested in how does he know that those cigars are the explosive ones or not?
Yeah, unless they're part of some other side quest and he knows that those items are needed to do this objective, so he takes them and repurposes them for something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe they're part of that story. Maybe one of the options is to get arrested, locked up with him, and bust out with the use of these cigars.
Yeah.
Or you sit there and wallow for 2 days until you get
busted out by Armistice.
By his crew.
Yeah. Interesting.
The inclusion of Armistice is interesting because clearly the Man in Black knows the events that happens, but he's not aware of her. This is his first time meeting her.
Yeah.
So it's almost like she's been written in recently.
Yeah. Well, it's
because he's quite taken by her backstory too, and it's a moment where he almost stops to appreciate the artfulness of the world. Like he has the same kind of reverence for it that Ford does.
Yeah.
That Cullen doesn't. Mm-hmm. And he really seems to appreciate the beauty of this story. It's a great story. It's very cool.
Yeah.
It's a neat moment to watch him have some respect for something in the world rather than just like laugh and go like, yeah.
Be like, think it's old hat.
It's old hat. Exactly.
Old hat, black hat, white hat.
Gray hat, old hat.
Yeah. Part of me wonders because she references Wyatt, which I don't think we've gotten to yet. We haven't gotten to that yet in our discussion, but she references Wyatt, so it's like she just got the update that Teddy got last week, you know.
She's part of this larger Wyatt narrative that Ford has begun.
So maybe in the stretch of things, she wasn't important before this. She was just another body to get shot to the Man in Black, and that's why he hasn't noticed her.
Well, her name is interesting. I did just look it up on IMDb. She is credited as Armistice, and an armistice is basically like a truce,
a ceasefire.
Yeah, a ceasefire. Yeah, and I wonder if she is named that, and if she has been recently inserted into the world as some sort of ceasefire between two parties that we're not aware of yet, or at least two parties that we may be aware of but don't know how they converge or interact with each other.
Yeah. Maybe
the Man in Black might be there to oppose Ford in some way, and she may be the beginning of some sort of saying like a sort of parlay.
Yeah.
Like they need to, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a really strange name for somebody who spends the whole show shooting and killing.
Yeah.
Pretty much so.
Being like one of the best shots.
There's
on
something.
The crew.
There's something more going on there.
Yeah. There's some subtext. So it turns out the other cigar is being smoked by the deputy who his head gets exploded, which was good.
Yeah.
The Man in Black and Hector save Lawrence at the last moment, which I thought was a really
once again
Hector or Lawrence is just kind of like, great. What in the hell?
There's a look that you'd almost rather have been shot to death than have his blindfold pulled off and have the Man in Black standing there kind of looking at him.
Yeah.
Okay, great, I got to deal with this jackwagon.
It's still going on. I was almost done, but
yeah.
Hector then offers the Man in Black a chance to tag along, but he turns him down to speak with Armistice about her snake tattoo. Turns out that Wyatt and his men killed Armistice's mom, and then she paints each part of the snake that's on her red with the blood of another one of the men that was involved in that situation.
There's one bit left.
And it's a man known as Wyatt. Most know as Wyatt is what she says. So interesting that she's being looped in. It's kind of it's funny that there are some people that Ford is kind of dynamically and eloquently working into the thing, and then there's just other people that he's like, I don't care what's going on with you. I don't care about your narratives. I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's like he's got fondness for these players. He's like, oh, I always liked her or something, that kind of thing. Teddy, he's like, Teddy, you've died a million times. Let's give you more purpose.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. It's almost kind of a meta commentary just on life, that not everybody is created equal. Not everybody will be treated fairly in life. Like, you've got the Doloreses of the world who are just, they just kind of float along, and in terms of her burgeoning consciousness anyway.
Yeah.
Clearly she's been murdered a lot and raped a lot, but she has kind of this almost beautiful transition into consciousness. And then you've got the Maves of the world who are just downtrodden, and she's relegated to being this like saloon girl, and she's starting to have these recurring nightmares,
Yeah.
And then like the Man in Black says, you've got the market tested Hector, who's like this really fun character who just gets a great story, and when he dies, he goes out gloriously in like a blaze of gunfire. And then you've got the Teddies of the world who have the great intentions, and they're like, they're pure of heart, so to speak, but he just dies horribly. Like, he just can't win.
Yeah. Somebody on the subreddit noted that Teddy and Lawrence are on the other sides of the life spectrum. Lawrence keeps getting saved, and Teddy just keeps getting murdered.
That's funny. I keep thinking of the Dark Tower reference of the Man in Black and the gunslinger, because Ford has referred to Teddy as a gunslinger, I think twice. And, we'll talk about something else later.
Okay. So then we cut back to Maeve watching as some Native Americans are being driven out of town, it seems.
Yep.
Like, I don't really necessarily know, but a child drops a doll that looks like one of the body shop workers in the hazmat suit. Yep. And Maeve tries to return it to the child and ask it about what it is. And one of the standard buys is just like, they're not going to talk to you about that. That's their religion.
Right.
And I should note for later on discussion, the Man in Black notes that Hector is a half Native American. I think is something. He mentions something about him being half Native American.
Oh yeah.
So that'll come up later. So then we cut to two guests. The two of the guests are two people from Hector's crew hit up the brothel, and Maeve ends up recognizing them as well. Did you notice that? Were they guests that were with? Was it the guy that asked the Man in Black about, or who came up and was the admirer?
Yeah, he was the one who gets tackled in the street, whose gun jams.
Okay. No, okay, so I'm thinking of something else. There's a scene where Maeve is she's standing there talking with Clementine.
Right.
And she recognizes these two guys that stand up, or Clementine is propositioning them.
Right, the guy who's sitting at the table laughing?
No. That's the earlier scene. This is a guy who Maeve recognizes as someone who has been there before with Hector, so I guess he can't be a guest.
Yeah.
But I thought the other guy was.
Okay, I got confused by what you're saying.
So I'd have to go back and watch it more closely. I don't really quite understand, but she realizes she's remembering that they're from Hector's crew, so she thinks something might be coming. It tips her off that Hector's going to be here soon, I think. Then we cut to Bernard watching Cullen get ready to leave after one of their nights together, or times together, because she seems to be leaving. Cullen has to meet with Ford, is what she mentions to him. And she said she had a great line. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, you can actually be quite charming, which I thought was a great line.
Yeah.
And Bernard gives her the suggestion of not being defensive to Ford, because he will detect it and sense it and use it against her potentially. So Cullen heads to Ford's construction site, which is a huge excavation going on, gigantic crane, good looking special or CGI.
Yeah, no, that was really good. It really made me wonder where this was and how big is Westworld. We still don't really know.
Yeah.
That this could be going on, and that the hosts aren't, they're not coming over.
And
the
nobody
hills,
else is
looking
aware.
around.
Yeah. So they sit down to eat at a restaurant that Cullen has visited in the past as a child, and Ford kind of aggressively just
displays omnipotence.
Ford essentially displays to her that she is an ant in his
He goes Odin,
kingdom.
full Odin on her.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're not king is what he says to Cullen.
Yes.
In this case, points if you get that reference. Please let me know on Twitter. There's kind of a point here where Ford starts talking about how they wrote about 100 storylines earlier on, but he was thinking that things would be balanced between people wanting to engage in narratives and then people wanting to just kill and murder and pillage and all that kind of crap. And he made a bet with Arnold about it. And it turned out that very few people used any of the storylines, and he lost the bet. Arnold assumed that it read to me that Arnold assumed that people wouldn't care about the storylines. He wouldn't that people wouldn't necessarily buy into Westworld being a living and thriving thing, more as they would just see it as an attraction where they could kill people. And then Arnold didn't want the quote unquote money men coming in, and Ford explains it as this isn't a business venture. It's not a theme park, but it's an entire world. Is the line that he has for Cullen. And then Ford kind of stops everyone from working to show his immense control over the park. Like the grass is no longer flowing. Like everything is under control by Ford without even like seemingly doing anything.
Right. Yeah.
He can just like think it and it happens.
The best shot of the episode was when she looks out past the veranda that they're on and sees the whole field of people just standing. It's chilling. Yeah.
Well, even when the wine starts pouring over in the glass and you realize that like as soon as your brain is like, oh, what's going on, and then you're like, oh.
That reminded me a lot of Watchmen. There's a bit later in Watchmen, in the book anyway, it doesn't really happen in the movie, where some characters are seated and another character is talking to them. And you just see their like over the shoulder kind of thing, these characters listening. And this butterfly, it's been kind of cruising around in the background, lands like on one of the characters' faces, and they don't react. And as you're reading this as the reader, this kind of happens and you go, what the? And then as you turn, you realize that they're dead. They've all been poisoned and they're all dead. And this character kept speaking anyway because they like hearing themselves talk, basically. Yeah. And that one series of pages in the book is better than anything in the movie, but it just goes to show the power of like that, even in that medium anyway, that works so well. Yeah. And that reminded me a lot of that, how we see the wine glass. You could see it. It was brilliant direction. Yeah. Ford's speaking and your eye is drawn to him, but then as that wine glass is filling, your eye is drawn to that because we all know, like, oh shit, that's gonna spill. Yeah, what's gonna happen?
Like, man, he's really feeling that. He's just over. Getting that wine to her.
The second thing I thought of was Wet Hot American Summer when what's his name? John Slattery is hanging out with Amy Poehler and he's like, more wine, and it cuts to her glass. Do you remember this from the series?
I can't remember it. I haven't watched it.
Oh, it was one of my favorite jokes in the whole TV series. He's hanging out with her, and he's like the creepy older drama guy. Yeah. And he's like, more wine, and it cuts to her glass, and it looks like this is about this full, and he just tops it off, and it's just literally to the brim. And it's like a pint glass or something. He fills it up. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, so basically, Ford shows Cullen that he's the boss. And then, and that he basically is in more control than she is in terms of like she's just a lackey for the board, and he.
Yeah, and it's interesting because she seems to come there thinking she's going to have some kind of. She has an agenda. Yeah, like Elsie points out, and I don't know if it's some sort of attempted power play, but there's multiple characters in this series that seem to think Ford is old and in the way. Yeah, and that he's going to be out soon, and it's time for like a new era in Westworld. And I think he's aware that they all think that, and he kind of shows her. He does the Bane moment from Dark Knight Rises, where he says, "You feel in charge."
Rests his hand on Ben Mendelsohn's shoulder.
Yes,
absolutely,
and it's great. There's a real darkness to Ford that comes out in this scene that I don't think was really there previously.
Yeah, well, I think it was hinted at.
It was there. It was hinted that he has this ability. He's in control, and he has this ability to kind of belittle his people a little bit. But this was the first time that felt like a full-on threat, or it was.
I noted last week that it was out of character that he sliced the host's face open. And then I also posited the theory that maybe Ford is behind Arnold's death in some way.
Well, and Ford straight up says in this one that Arnold lost his mind, that he went mad.
Yes, he lost his perspective and essentially went mad. And then Ford also mentions that they know everything about their employees and guests, and even suggests to her that she needs to be careful with Bernard's sensitive disposition, showing that he knows this thing. And Ford shows that he will destroy the restaurant, despite it being Teresa's only like good memory and favorite place within Westworld, being like, I don't care about you. You are nothing to me.
In that moment, he just, with his brain, steers the crane over there and goes, you know what? I'm going to bring it right on down just because you said you liked it.
Yep. Dolores offers to follow them into the... We cut to Dolores and William and Logan going to head into this homestead to kill or get their bounty. Dolores offers to go in with them, but William has her stay behind. Then Logan and William go in and kill all but the one wanted man at this family homestead where they had just kind of been terrorizing the family that was living there. Logan finds a new gun that he fancies. Somebody said that they felt like they could see the purple text coming off of the gun as if it was in Borderlands.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Destiny being a rare gun. And so that was good. And they end up taking their bounty out of there as well. The Man in Black, we cut to the Man in Black and Lawrence searching for Wyatt, and they end up finding Teddy tied up after, supposedly, I'm guessing after the events of last week where he was left behind.
Beset upon by Wyatt's gang.
Yep. Bloody but not dead, and the Man in Black cuts him free.
The Man in Black, of course, knows him.
Yep.
Again.
And so
Teddy.
So Teddy just kind of finds his way out. Or presumably, it doesn't. We don't really know what happens to Teddy, but I got the impression that's the last we see of them that episode, right? Yeah.
I think he's with them.
Oh, so maybe he's coming along for the ride. Yeah. I
did you watch the next week on?
I did.
This is the first week I watched it too.
Okay.
I kind of wish I hadn't.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much.
Okay, it did make me excited. We should talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
second.
Fine.
Second.
Then we cut to Logan and. Basically he wants the outlaw gagged and ends up killing the deputy with them after he finds out that the outlaw has an in for El Lazo. Logan basically wants William to go black hat with him, quote unquote. He's like, we did this thing for you, now let's do this for me. You've got your girl. Logan notes that this is an Easter egg.
Yes. Which
I think is interesting. And then William basically freaks out about Logan shooting a man because he's treating it very real now. Mm-hmm. Dolores is pissed about them letting the outlaw go. And William notes, he says, the second we get away from the real world, you turn into an evil prick, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think somebody in the subreddit talked about how it's like William has never played a game of Grand Theft Auto or something like that. Yeah. And Logan calls William Billy, and it makes William really angry.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Wasn't there something about a name in the original Westworld? Maybe I'm putting something together. I thought there was something about a nickname. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I'll have to do more research.
I didn't think about that, but now that you're saying it, something that Brolin said to...
Yeah, it's either Brolin to the other guy or the other guy says to the
I don't remember.
lady of the night that he's with or something. I can't remember. I'll have to look into that.
Lady of the night.
Logan very plainly discusses the game around the hosts, and Dolores kind of gets confused about it, as we've talked about previously, where her programming doesn't have any context for that. And then Logan we cut to a shot of Logan seemingly heading to Pariah, which is where the outlaw wants to go to hook up with El Lazo.
Right.
The name of the town. I don't know if we get the indication that William is headed there with them or not. So, any thoughts on that scene?
Not really. Just curious about this dynamic between Logan and William.
Absolutely. And then finally, the final scene of the show, Hector's back in town to rob the brothel with some guests this time. QA is aware of the situation and adds some soldiers to give the guests something to shoot at, essentially. But the QA control room also notes that there's families heading to Sweetwater at that time, so they start wrapping up the assault prematurely by jamming guns, and then they're going to jail the guests overnight. And then Hector, so Maeve gets the jump on Hector and holds a gun up to him as he walks into the place. She takes him up to where the safe is and basically gives him a proposition. I will give you the combination if you answer these questions for me. She shows Hector the picture of the body shop worker and asks, what is this? And Hector happens to know this. He says it's Native American lore called a shade, a man who walks between worlds, and he says that they're brought to their world from hell. So they kind of go, they're the in-betweens between hell and heaven and Westworld, essentially, is what the Native Americans think. This is where that Native American connection for Hector comes in, I think.
Right.
We get an offhand word from the Man in Black to kind of set up this scene. And then Maeve asks Hector to cut her open to look for a bullet fragment that she thinks is there, and she finds it. And she very much says, none of this matters. She's aware that she can die and be brought back to life.
Yeah, it's a really kind of a watershed moment for her, at least within the episode, if not the whole season so far, that she says it affirms for her that she's not insane. It confirms two things, basically. One, I'm not insane, and B, none of this matters.
Yep. Yeah, so that's pretty crazy.
Pretty bleak ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely left me, most of the other episodes have either left me with a note of I don't want to say, definitely not like a good feeling. There's nothing that ends, but usually a thought of like, I can't wait to see what's next. Or something, but this left me just with this, like, I was like, oh, just like a sadness.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, we were talking a little bit before the episode. You said that you didn't like this episode very much.
I didn't like this one very much. No, not. I don't want to say I didn't like it. And as usual, I was driving here and I was thinking like, I didn't like this episode, but by the end of our talk, I'm gonna like it more. And that's true. I do like it more, but I feel like I'm not in a different place at the end of this episode than I was at the end of the previous episode.
We're treading water a bit.
A little bit, yeah. I feel like I haven't quite. I have no forward momentum.
Yeah, and I had brought up the idea. I think the honeymoon phase is a little bit wearing off with the show.
Yeah.
I didn't dislike this episode, but these past two episodes I've kind of been like, we're getting more context of things, but we're less. I think we're so much more aware of this world and more of the rules around it, even though we're still in the dark on a lot of stuff, that I think our brains are still extremely engaged, but the show is not feeding us that information.
Right. I would like some small resolutions here and there.
Yeah.
Or at least we're getting to that point now where questions have been continually being raised with each episode, and now that my ratio of questions raised to questions answered is not quite satisfying enough for me.
So we're getting to, next episode is going to be episode 5, and that's halfway through the season. I'm wondering if anything major is going to happen next week, but we'll see.
Yes. We will.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Overall,
still a good episode.
Ready for next week.
Yes.
Happy with everything going on. There's a sad lack of Stephen Ogg in this episode, but
I was going to say that earlier while you were talking about that. Yeah.
There was no Rebus as far as we saw.
Stephen Ogg.
But hopefully he comes back.
Also no
Sizemore?
I'm really bad with the names of this show. It's hard.
Well, Nicole actually noted that last night when we were watching, because she's like, HBO's terrible at using names. And I kind of said to her, I was like, I think it might be that idea of if they mention names too often, then it feels unnatural.
Correct. Yeah.
Because I was
going to say that.
When I'm talking to you, I don't call you Nick very often.
No.
But I maybe I do on the podcast so that people know, like on Film Nerds I would, so that people knew that I was directing something at you.
Right.
But in terms of in real life, we don't refer to each other with our first names very often.
With some people, it's almost weird when you use their name.
Yeah.
It comes out strange.
Yep.
You only use their name when you're talking to somebody else.
Yeah. So I think that's why they don't do that. But it is the only reason I know the names of these people is because I have a podcast about this show, and then I'm sitting here writing these notes so that I can actually refer to people correctly.
Well, generally the only time in the show you hear characters' names are when two or more other characters are talking about a character, or when the Man in Black is just being a dick to them.
Yep.
Saying,
pretty much.
Hey, Teddy.
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, all in all, I don't really have like a spoilery section for this week because I think most of the cards are on the table now in terms of there are some big theories on the subreddit still kind of kicking around, but I can do more research for next week to see if there's still any crazy stuff going on. There's still people wondering about whether or not Westworld is on Earth or not.
Yeah.
So all that stuff is still generally out there, and I don't think that we've gotten any real disproven or deconfirmation of anything so far. But no, yeah, I'm happy with the show so far. Once again, you can find more of our episodes on westworld.fm. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music. We're on a new player called Satchel Player that one of our listeners wanted us to be on. So go check us out there. Subscribe. If you really want to support us, you need to rate and review this show on whatever podcatcher you are listening to it on. That will help us become more visible, help us get more listeners, and make sure that this is something that we can continue doing. So please be sure to go and rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, and all of those awesome places. We would be very happy to do that. And maybe if we start getting some of those reviews, we'll talk about them on the show. Hopefully reviews are positive, but even if they're not, maybe we can address them. We're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can email us westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on air, much like our wonderful listeners did this week. Gordon, Katrine, Chris, and Quinn. Please write in. We love hearing from you. It makes what we're doing here even more worth it to know that there are people out there listening to it. The Midwest Podcast Network has several other shows. Please go to MidwestPodcastNetwork.com to check them out. And we just did a new episode about the Midwest Game Nerds of the Midwest Game Nerds podcast about PlayStation VR and Gears of War 4. So if you're into video games, like you probably might be if you are still listening to our show and watching Westworld, go check out MidwestGameNerds.com. And that's it for this week. We're excited for next week, and we'll have another episode of the podcast out after that. But until then, may you rest and have a deep and dreamless slumber.